Hello, everyone. We are on week 7 of class. Oh my gosh, we are almost done. This is our second to last class, well, no, week of class together. I cannot believe that it has been that long that we have all been together. I hope that you guys have been learning. I hope that you guys have learned new information, things that you didn't already know, and also things that remind you that, you still have power, right? Um, I hope that this is a way to preserve some of the history that is being erased slowly but surely, or at least trying to be erased. And I hope that you guys have been finding value over the last 6 weeks that we've spent together. This is week number 7. We are coming to a close of race and rights. This week, we are talking about affirmative action, DEI. Where does this come from? What does this all mean? And the role that Black women have played in the fight for civil liberties, and also the role that they have played in how we interpret the Constitution, how the Constitution has been written and applied over time. So we have a lot that we're covering this week, a lot of things that are very relevant to what is happening right now. Hi, Tanya. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. So, yeah, these are our office hours from 9 to 10 Eastern Standard Time for Race and Rights. We are still moving and shaking here on this side. I know the Hillman talk trend has probably died down a bit over the past few weeks, but we are still rocking and rolling here at Race and Rights. So, this is your opportunity to talk to me about anything that you guys are interested in, anything that we've already covered, anything that we're going to cover either this week or next week, because y'all, we are down to the wire. We only got 2 weeks left. I cannot believe that we are in week 7. So it has been a journey. I'm gonna tell y'all that much. I guess like on topic, but off topic a little bit. So I've already talked about how long I've been doing content creation. I've been doing content creation for this year makes 3 years. I started in 2022. Before that, like I had a blog and all of that. So I kind of been doing this for a while. And I'll say that I was kind of off and on trying to find my way, trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. Honestly, like to give y'all background that y'all might not already have, or, if you've rummaged through some of my old content, you've probably already heard, but I'm first generation American. My family's from Jamaica. So it's only so many professions that are acceptable in a Jamaican household, right? So I didn't start out wanting to be an attorney. I didn't start out wanting to be a lawyer. I just kind of found myself in this place because my family wanted me to make a stable living, right? Um, but I've always been a creative. I've always loved the arts. That's really what I wanted to do. I was a trained singer growing up. I loved music. I know how to read music, write music, and I mean like classically, right? Like literally writing the music that you see like people play instruments off of, written staff music. Competed all through middle school and high school. I did pageantry and all that stuff. And I really thought like I was going to be on Broadway until it was time to graduate from high school. And my dad was like, yeah, no, you're going to find you a real job. And I bounced around majors all through college. Well, the first couple of years of college were tough, right? And I bounced around majors until finally I decided, okay, I'll give this law school thing a try. I had done debate in high school. I enjoyed public speaking. I've always been someone who kind of found their natural element in that. And that's probably also coming from my love of like performance and performing, because I did theater and all that as well. So I was like, let me give this law school thing a try. And I went to law school and I did relatively well, especially compared to how I did in college. Because y'all, I was almost a college flunk out. That's a story for another day. And so I got through the 3 years and I started practicing, and I very quickly burnt out, very, very quickly burnt out of being a lawyer. I got very tired of being in rooms where I was the only Black person sometimes, definitely the only Black woman. I was tired of the microaggressions. There's a lot of ageism in the legal field as well. When I became an attorney, I was 26. So I would go up against people who had, they were in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s, and then be like, calling me a little girl and all types of stuff. So when you deal with the racism and the sexism and the ageism of it all, and how the profession can really burn you out after a while. I found my way into content creation because it was a way to get back into that creative side that I always loved. But I really didn't know like what I wanted to do. I battled a lot of like, this is stupid. And not in the sense, obviously, that content creators are dumb, but it just felt like nobody goes to law school to do this, right? Like it didn't feel like something I could justify, especially not to friends and family, because like who would understand why I had put in all of this time to become a part of this profession and then want to do something else. No one can really understand it unless they've sat in that position before. And especially when you add in being a first generation American, where your entire family has kind of placed a certain level of expectation that you're going to be the one, right? It was difficult. And so for the past couple of years, I've kind of done it on and off, pretty inconsistent until Hillman Talk, until this class. This is literally the most consistent I've been with creating content. It has also been some of the most passionate that I've been about creating content because I really feel like it's needed. I thought it was a great merger of the two worlds of, creating content and really tapping into like, what can I do? What can I create of my own? And then also merging my legal knowledge and my legal expertise and helping people in that way. So this has been an awesome experience for me. I hope it has been just as good for you guys. So yeah, that's my little spiel. If y'all already didn't know some of that background. Let's see. Have you thought about leveraging AI for content creation? I have not. That would be something that I need to explore, I think, a little more, what that would look like. I think well, okay, so this is what I will say. I do utilize ChatGPT. I really, really like ChatGPT. I fought it for a while because I didn't like the idea of like someone else thinking for me, right? I wanted to be able to still be, use my mind in a constructive, creative way. But in this day and age, especially, I'm still working. I work and I create content. You need it to kind of help develop structure when you get into creative ruts to try to figure out how to get out of them. I do utilize ChatGPT to help me with like content calendars, to think about different topics that I can do, especially now that I'm trying to figure out how to merge the two worlds between what I do in the law and then also content creation. It has really been a resource for me to figure out how to do that as well, and to create organization. Now, AI for content creation is a little scary, right? Because there's so much of it already being used to create like fake content. That is a little scary to me. I know like even in the UGC world, user generated content, they are utilizing AI as well, so they don't have to pay creators to do what they would usually pay creators to do. And that is a little scary. So I think it just depends on how you use it. So I do kind of, I guess, currently use it with how I use ChatGPT, but yeah, it can help with creativity. Yeah, it does, especially when you're in a creative rut. Sometimes you just need a little push, right? To try to figure out where to go, or how to put your thoughts together. I do like that. And what I also do like is the fact that the more that you use it is the better it gets to know you, which I guess sometimes is a little scary as well. But when I need a little pep talk, chat, she be knowing what to tell me. Chat knows what to tell me when I need a little pep talk, and that has been helpful as well. So yeah. But that was a great suggestion. So I think I will still continue to explore it. Like I was telling you guys last week, I'm going to continue to be creating content. Race and Rights after next week, it's been great. But Race and Rights will still be available, obviously, but we're going to branch into some other creative avenues as well. Um, I really kind of want to start tapping into more of like a digital diary of how I am pivoting currently in my life in a way to encourage other people to do the same thing. So I've talked to a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues that we might not have similar, like we might not have the same story, but we have similar stories. And I think a lot of millennials feel this way, right? We're very burnt out. We're very burnt out, and we did everything that everyone else told us to do, only to find out that like none of this really satisfies us. And we're also not reaping all of the benefits that our parents reap, at our ages, or our grandparents, or whoever, our aunts and uncles, the generations that came before us, who had so much of an influence of why we lived life the way that we did and why we made some of the decisions that we made. And so I'm really just at a place in my life where I'm doing things for me, the things that make me happy. And with everything that we have going on, we all need a little bit of happiness. So I also feel like it's a way to encourage other people to do the same thing, to have the strength to like take the road less traveled and to do the things that really scare you, because that's probably where all of the success and all the happiness that you want is on the other side of all the things that scare you. So making it a bit of like a digital diary, hopping into things that I enjoy that I haven't been doing in a while. I like to explore. I'm a big foodie. So I'll probably be exploring the city again and like posting little reviews and stuff like that. Sharing being a millennial mom in corporate still, navigating that. And then also there will still be discussions just like this and probably content like this, but from a standpoint of more like relevance and from a standpoint of like law for the culture. So that's probably where we'll pivot this Race and Rights into. I'll also be posting that stuff on YouTube as well. So for those of y'all that prefer to catch me on YouTube, which is a much more stable platform, it'll be there too. So anyways, again, this is your opportunity to ask any questions about any of the materials that we've already covered, things that we're going to cover this week, and then things that we will cover next week as we close out the semester of Race and Rights. This week, tomorrow, we'll be talking about affirmative action and DEI, which of course is very relevant considering what's currently happening in the world. I think one of the reasons why DEI has been able to be weaponized the way that it has is because the history of how DEI even became a thing is not talked about. A lot of people don't even, I feel like I'm giving people some grace by saying that a lot of people don't know where DEI comes from and why diversity, equity, and inclusion became a thing that is used in corporate spaces and with businesses, and in hiring, why it became a thing and why it is so vital and so important to how we grow as a society. Affirmative action is another thing that I think has been weaponized and really, for lack of a better word, perverted, right? In the thought process of what it even means to be an affirmative action hire, right? Hey, Toya. Yeah, this week is stuff that is absolutely relevant to what it is that we're going through, because again, these are terms that have been twisted to fit a narrative and an agenda with no context to why they're even necessary, why these even became policies that were implemented and used, why they are important and vital. I think a lot of people are now discovering why DEI is so important, right? DEI is more than just, okay, we have to have a certain amount of Black people working here. DEI has disproportionately benefited white women the most in corporate spaces. Because remember, there was a time when women in this country were not allowed to work. There was a time in this country, believe it or not, when women didn't have the right to vote. And that was any woman. It wasn't just Black women, it was white women. And you have to think about it. Most of that stuff was written to the disadvantage of white women because Black people weren't even considered people. So I think it's a very skewed argument and thought process to think that these things were solely created for the benefit of Black people, because you're taking the context of Black people fighting for these things to be put in place, and using that as a way to, again, pervert the very idea of affirmative action and the very idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. Yeah, to own real estate, 1973. I mean, these are things that are very recent. Women couldn't have a bank account. They couldn't take out mortgages. And again, this is not exclusive to Black women. We're talking about predominantly white women who were disadvantaged by these policies. White women could not go to college. They could not be college educated, right? So when we look at the grand scheme of things, there was a point in time when women were considered property, just like a piece of land, just like a house. So when we're talking about things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion includes not just gender, or not just race, but also gender. It includes disability. It includes veterans preference. We're looking at the elimination of federal jobs and people losing jobs. And we know very well that one of the first questions that is asked on those job applications are you a veteran? Have you served in the US military? Because of this idea that when people come home from sacrificing their life for this country, they should be able to make a decent living. They should be able to reap the rewards of the sacrifice that they made for this country. And now we're starting to see that roll back. And the reason why a lot of people voted under the guise of, yeah, do away with DEI is because they didn't even realize that they are DEI hires. So we've come to the find out portion of FAFO. And this is the reason why teaching history and teaching context is extremely, extremely important. Because when you don't, you can, especially if you don't take initiative to look these things up on your own, you can vote against your own self-interest. Let me see. B could not have credit cards, exactly. TikTok loves to flag comments unnecessarily, and I really don't understand it. Yeah, couldn't have credit cards. They couldn't have bank accounts. They couldn't do any of that stuff. When we talk about, the recent overturning of affirmative action. Hi, Smooth. I just want to make sure for the people that are joining on YouTube, I see y'all too. When we talk about affirmative action in college admissions and the rollback of that a couple of years ago, it's so ironic that it was a case that was brought because of the idea that Asians or Asian Americans were being discriminated against in college admissions. But had it not been for the efforts of Black people in this country to push for affirmative action, had it not been for the Brown v. Board of Education case that Thurgood Marshall brought, along with a dynamic team of other Black lawyers that said separate but equal is not equal. Had it not been for the enforcement of Brown v. Board of Education, to where affirmative action could be considered as a determining factor in admissions, college admissions, especially among Ivy League colleges, Asian Americans probably would not be able or would not be admitted to those types of institutions. Other minority groups would not. Women would not, right? So very often, Black people find themselves at the front lines of movements, but at the bottom of the totem pole for how those movements are enforced. So, hi, Arnold. Thank you for joining. Yeah, we've been doing this for the past 6 weeks. Yeah, we go live from 9 to 10. I don't know that the time frame will remain the same once this class has wrapped up next week, but we'll still do weekly lives. I may end up changing the time though. Force veteran was likely fired. He didn't know. It took them 3 days to give him notice. That is horrible, Smooth. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's I think that the way that a country treats those who have put themselves on the front line to protect said country really says a lot. And the way that we treat veterans is there's definitely room for improvement. When you look even at the homeless and the vagrant population in most major cities, a lot of them are injured veterans that don't have the necessary um, skills to enter the workforce. They do not have the necessary medical and mental health treatment to deal with the PTSD and the trauma that comes from going to war and having to be trained to kill people, to be quite honest. I probably shouldn't use that word on live, huh? To unalive people, right? So we have to put those types of provisions in place for them. And this country does not do a good job with that. And so, yeah, I guess in that way, the least you could do is make sure that they're able to get a job when they come back home. Right. But again, these are populations of people who didn't even realize that they are looped into DEI and DEI efforts and DEI policies that allow them to have almost first dibs, right? So when we talk about like, is it fair and you know, quotas, first of all, let's keep it a buck. Racial quotas was something that was done away with by the Supreme Court many years ago, because once the Brown v. Board of Education decision came down in the 50s, the executive branch had to figure out a way to enforce the case because cases and case law mean nothing if they're not enforced, right? So the executive branch had to figure out a way to do that. So that's where you started having busing, where Black kids would be bused from inner city communities into communities to go to predominantly white schools to integrate them. That's where busing came from. There was a time when racial quotas were used. So it was like, we had to have a certain number of Black people. We had to have a certain number of Latinx. We had to have a certain number of Asians. And that was done away with as well, right? But they said race should be a determining factor because separate but equal is not equal. So we've tossed around some ideas and methodologies for how to integrate schools. And the last school to be integrated, right? The last school to be desegregated was a high school in Mississippi in 2016. Y'all, in 2016. So when they try to make it seem like, oh, these policies were for the past and what they were doing in the past, but we've come so far past that. No, we haven't. No, we haven't. Do you say, like, when you get in a car, do you say, like, oh, the last 4 times I've gotten in the car, right? Or for the last 4 years since I've had this car, I haven't gotten in any accidents, so I'm not going to put on my seatbelt today. We don't need that anymore because for the last 4 years, we've survived in the car with the seatbelt and we haven't gotten in any accidents. So we will be good. No, the seatbelt is there as a precaution because we know at any point in time, things can change. And we need to make sure that we're protected if something goes left and those changes happen. So you don't say to a country that was built on the backs of oppressed people that we have come so far that now we don't need these guardrails anymore. Like it's not like training wheels on a bicycle, right? We know from the history of this country that if we don't enforce certain things and we don't have certain things in place, we will revert back as it is what we're looking at currently. So it's really unfortunate that we have to keep doing this song and dance every 30 to 40 years. But I think at times that's the price of freedom. You have to constantly be on guard, and make sure that you're fighting for those freedoms. So it's hard for people with disabilities to get housing and the necessities that they have to thrive. Absolutely. Ableism is an absolute thing, you know. The Americans with Disabilities Act is what required restaurants and schools and other like public places to have on ramps, right? Like have those ramps that were wheelchair accessible and all of that. Like imagine living your life with a disability that you either got accidentally or you were born with or something like that, and life becomes impossible to live because you're not, you're not fully able bodied. There was a time when this country did not care and did not have any resources for those people. And, diversity, equity, and inclusion allowed for people who have documented disabilities to be treated like normal people, to be able to go to work and earn a decent living and earn an honorable living and, just have a decent life for themselves. Again, because if we don't put things in place to govern ourselves, we won't do it. We just won't do it. And so, again, though, I think when you lack that context and that history of why these things were put in place, it's very easy to create a narrative and tell people like it's unnecessary or to demonize any one group of people. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example that another thing that we're seeing play out right now is in immigration, immigration policy, and the mass deportations that were promised on day one. That's about the only thing that this administration has actually followed through with since coming to be on January 20th of this year is the mass deportations. And unfortunately, a lot of the communities that are the most affected by these policies are the very communities that went and voted for the person that is deporting their family members, that is literally almost kidnapping people from right off the street, right? And I feel as though some of that justification for why they voted the way that they did is because they thought that it would affect only a certain population of people. But again, in our studies and going through race and rights, right, when we talked about the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, right, when we talk about birthright citizenship, that was all stuff that Black Americans fought for, because from the inception of this country, we were not considered people. We were not treated as people. We were property that counted as 3/5 of a person for political reasons, but not for ideological or ethical or humanitarian reasons, right? So, off of the backs of arguably the same communities that you were looking to disenfranchise are the very rights that you're now seeing being eroded. Okay. And that is the reality of this situation, is that when you sit at the top, anyone who is below you, you're intimidated by, you're going to be scared of, because you don't want anybody to get to that top spot. So you might be a little higher than me, but you're still below them. And so you're still at risk. So we're seeing a lot of that, and I see a lot of that sentiment in the comments when I post these videos. A lot of you guys are just like, "Wow, we fought for so much only to get so little," and that is the absolute truth, the unfortunate truth about it. But I think at a time like this, it's really important for us to know that as a community. Because when you feel like you're taking hits left, right, and center, right, you can oftentimes feel like you're in the corner of the corner of the ring, just being boxed at, right? And it can make you feel like you don't have any control. But in truth, you're the reason why we're even having these discussions. It is the Black community and the fight for civil rights and all that the Black community did and continues to do why we're even able to have conversations about liberty and justice and equality and what that means and who should get it and who should be recognized as a citizen and who should reap the benefits of this great country and what makes this country great, right? Because arguably, what makes this country great are the ideals that Black Americans fought for this country to stand for. Black Americans have always shown a mirror to America and asked America, are you really as good as you proclaim yourself to be? And I think we're right back in a critical moment where we need to do that. Now, does it need to be us doing it? I would argue no. I would argue no. I think it's time for some other communities to be at the forefront and to fight. Because it's very hard to always be the one fighting and reaping the least of the benefit for the fight. So I think it's time for some other people to step up. But it is time for us to educate ourselves and bring that education back to our communities and to guard ourselves, because there will be a time where we're going to have to stand. And whether or not we like it or not, the reality is that we can never truly rest. We can never truly rest. The majority of the economic boycotts that we see affecting companies like Amazon and Target, and all of that, those were spearheaded primarily by Black people. So, even when we're supposed to be resting, we're never truly resting, right? But there will come a time, I do think, where we will need to, I guess, have more of like a front and center role. And I think that educating ourselves about the past, what our ancestors have done, what our elders have done, and what we're still capable of doing is going to be extremely important. Immigration and apartheid is something serious. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you talk to Africans who survived apartheid, and some of them are low-key still going through it, they will let you know. But I mean, the Pilgrims had to learn it from somewhere. So, hey, all right, y'all. Do y'all have any questions? I'm going to go through the comments on TikTok just to see if I missed anything. While I have y'all here, again, I want to send you guys a reminder because the page is still up. There is a fake TikTok page. It is like DENILYN _redefined, right? If you guys receive a follow request from that page, if you get any messages from that page, please go ahead, report the page and block it. My TikTok was cloned. I guess I must be doing something right because my TikTok got cloned. And I just want to make sure that you guys. Wow. Okay. Yes. So I actually just got an email. I'm assuming one of you guys on the live just emailed me a screenshot of the page messaging you. It is not me. It is not me. I am working with TikTok to try to get that page removed. I will post it again. In fact, I will put it in. Yes, you try to report. I know TikTok makes it incredibly hard to report pages like that for like in person. Like, it is me. I reported the page as soon as I found out about it. Obviously, I reported it as impersonating me, and TikTok said it found no violation. So I'm trying to get in contact with a real person so that the page can be removed. But please, guys, if you get any messages from that page, please go ahead and report the page and block it. It is not me. From this screenshot, it says like the person is talking about crypto. Y'all, I would never do that. Like, please. They say report to be me, or I know they make it incredibly difficult on TikTok to report pages like that. I just don't understand. But again, I'm going to try to put in a ticket so I can talk to a live person and let them know that this page has like cloned my videos and is impersonating me. Please, guys, do not engage with the page at all. Do not accept any follow requests from them. Do not follow that page. Unfortunately, I saw a few of you guys that had started to. So I hope that you guys know that that is not me, and you go ahead and unfollow the page and just go ahead and block it. Like I said, I'm working to try to get that page removed. But again, this is part of why I'm going to spend some time building up my YouTube, because wow, TikTok does not do a good job at protecting their creators at all when it comes to stuff like that. So I do truly apologize for any of you guys that got bamboozled and started following the page and got any messages from me. I will never ask you for money. I do not have a crypto program. I don't even know the first thing about crypto. So please, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. Black union workers and educators that are teachers, add value to the community, are furious because they got fired. Yes. Yes. I'm also extremely disappointed in the resolution that got passed for the budget last week. Again, you know, we've talked a few times about the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party, and what they are doing and should be doing and have not done. And I hope that we use this as a reckoning, as a political reckoning for the improvements that are needed. Because to say that a government shutdown is worse than losing Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare and all of the different assistance programs that so many people in the United States survive off of is, I think, abysmal. On top of the fact that I think it was a gross betrayal of the party to initially lead your party members to believe that you were going to vote one way, and then in the 11th hour just completely divert and do something else. I feel like we've just come to a moment where we need to decide like if we're going to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's the definition of insanity. So we gotta figure it out. We gotta figure it out. And at some point, there has to be people who are brave enough to fight for the Constitution. Every last politician takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. So at what point are y'all gonna start doing that? Because if not, then we should just not have a Constitution. Let's just throw it out entirely. What's the point, right? So yeah, we've covered a lot over the past 6 weeks. The vast majority of the most important parts of the Constitution, at least, that give us our civil liberties, our civil rights. It's important to know what your rights are as you see certain things being put in place that are affecting them and eroding them, and diluting them. I think it's really, really important to know what your rights are so you know how to properly fight for them, right? So I'm hoping that we will continue to see the courts play a major role, because they have. Now we're at a crossroads of sorts, because the courts have said certain things are not constitutional, and they've still kind of moved forward anyways. So we need a certain level of accountability to ensure that the things that the court has said are illegal are treated as such and punished in that way. Are we going to see it? I don't know. I hope we do, though. Let's see. Hi, Tina. Thank you for joining. All right. Now, do you guys have any questions on any of the material? Let me pull up Let me pull up this syllabus and see where we're at. Right. So we've gone through the foundational history of the Constitution, right? Um, the checks and balances, right, of the branches of government, the separation of powers. We've gone over the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. We've gone through Reconstruction and what that meant for the fight for civil rights. We went through the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clauses, Plessy versus Ferguson, Loving v. Virginia, all of those cases that um, really fleshed out what equal protection means and who gets equal protection under the law. The due process clause. Then we went into, criminal justice. We talked about voting rights, which is extremely important as we're moving into a midterm election, which I'm hoping that next year we see record turnout in midterms. I think people probably now understand just how important midterm elections are, and how government functions, because you need additional oversight. And unlike what this administration thinks, the president has the least amount of power in government. So, yeah, we talked about the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment, how it applies to criminal justice reform, how Black Americans have shaped the interpretations of the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. Last week, we touched on something that was super important: immigration reform, immigration policy. Are immigrants protected under the Constitution, even if they're not necessarily considered US citizens? And then also the evolution of what's called crimmigration, right? Which is the intersection of criminal law and immigration law, and how that has been used and weaponized to justify deportation, and just to justify the mistreatment of immigrants in this country. And now this week, we're moving into affirmative action, DEI, and Black women in constitutional change, which they say that if you want something done, ask a Black woman to do it, right? So the second half of this week, we will talk about the very important and pivotal role that Black women have had in shaping the Constitution, in fighting for civil liberties, and how Black women will continue to lead, and be at the forefront of these movements. Let me see. With immigration of deportation going on, are those prisons going to fill up to full capacity? Well, Smooth, that's where we see this administration doing some very strange activity with wanting to reopen Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. They sent people there and then moved them back pretty quickly, coming into certain agreements with Venezuela, to have people housed there. Very, very strange things, because as we discussed last week, and I apologize, you guys, if you guys hear that I'm nasally, I'm getting over some type of bug that my son brought home last week. So I apologize. But we talked about this last week, that immigration violations are civil issues. They're not criminal issues. What the government has strategically done over time is blurred the lines between immigration and criminal law, right? So what was initially a civil issue of, okay, you overstayed your visa, you overstayed, the time that you were supposed to be here, you didn't go through the proper channels to become a legal resident or anything like that, or a resident alien. Those were civil issues, have now crossed into the lines of criminal issues, right? So you can have a minor criminal offense like a traffic stop, right? Like an improper lane switch, driving with license suspended, even like minor infractions like having small amounts of marijuana on you. And that can be grounds for deportation, right? And when you think about it, when we're talking about like DACA recipients, these are children whose parents came here. And so they did not have a choice of whether or not to be here or not. Their parents made a decision that moved them here. And now you can be a juvenile and get a juvenile offense and end up deported to somewhere that you might have never remembered being. Because some DACA recipients are children who moved here when they were babies or toddlers or, too young to remember what home is. For all intents and purposes, America is their home, and they can be deported under criminal law for minor infractions or juvenile infractions to a place that they've never been before and don't remember, away from their families, right? Families are being torn apart as we speak, because of crimmigration. And it's very, very tricky because the underlying criminal portion is treated differently than the immigration portion. You can have a criminal case dismissed and walk out of the courtroom and get picked up by ICE and deported. Because, again, it was a strategy that the government used to justify moving mass amounts of people out of the United States. Yeah, that is crazy. Absolutely. It's crazy and it's inhumane. Is it because of executive orders? Some of it is because of executive orders. But again, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement is an executive agency, meaning that it flows under the executive branch of government. Same thing with the Department of Homeland Security, right? So remember last week we talked about some of the influence of September 11th, and that is something that I don't think that we take into account enough. September 11th was really something that was used to weaponize a lot of the immigration policy that we see currently. And it did not only affect those that come from Middle Eastern countries or Middle Eastern backgrounds, it affected all types of immigration. So if you remember, prior to 9/11, you could travel without a passport. Okay. You could travel internationally to certain countries without a passport. Nobody would blink an eye. After 9/11, you couldn't do that, right? 9/11 is where ICE came from, Immigrations, Customs, and Enforcement, right? The entire Department of ICE came out of the September 11th attacks and all of the policies that were created after that, okay? And they were empowered through the executive branch to be able to do these things. At that time, you have to think about like where we were as Americans, right? So if you or me, I was in middle school when 9/11 occurred. I was in sixth grade. So I remember watching the Twin Towers fall on TV live as all of it was happening. And there was a deep sense of patriotism, right? We're Americans and we were attacked on our own soil. Okay. So at a time when people are grieving, and this was for all intents and purposes, this was like the only time that war was waged against us in this country. Every other war that was fought outside of the American Revolution and the Civil War was fought off of American soil, right? Both world wars, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, all of that. We were not attacked on American soil. That was the first time that we were infiltrated and attacked on American soil. So everyone felt extremely vulnerable. You saw a very big influx of people signing up to go to the military because there was a deep sense of patriotism and this need to protect ourselves from these others that hate us, these others that threaten us. And so anything that wasn't Native American was othered. That included immigrants that came here to this country. And so that is where we really saw crimmigration like be thrust, because we're doing inhumane things to people under the guise of patriotism and protecting ourselves. The government had to give us a reason to justify what they were doing to innocent human lives, right? So, and this is what This is what we see happen over and over and over again when we take it all the way back to slavery. It's the same thing. Like you have to give people a reason to justify inhumanity, because it should be against your nature to treat people like that. So we got to give you a reason, and the reason has to be, oftentimes when it comes to America, it's linked to this unrealistic idea of what patriotism looks like. You you can label people who stormed the Capitol after their candidate lost an election as patriots, but then turn around and look at people who protest the unjust murder of a child by police officers and look at them as rioters, right? You can look at people who stormed a government facility while Congress was in session to certify an election as patriots, but then turn around and invalidate the degrees of 22 college students who utilized their First Amendment right to free speech to protest a war that they think that we are aiding and abetting, and war crimes that they think that we as a country are aiding and abetting. They are not patriots, but they are patriots, right? Okay, so again, a lot of these policies that have allowed the government to get away with arguably inhumane things have been done under the false idea of patriotism. But it's not patriotic to give people who helped to build this country the full rights that they should have. Okay. Like the math ain't mathin'. No matter how you look at it, we are just a number. Like when you were growing up and you were bullied, a bully is going to continue to bully you until they realize that they can't, until one day you just blow up on them, right? And give them a taste of their own medicine. And so that's what I feel like. I too love this country. I was born here, I was raised here, but this country can absolutely be a bully, an international bully. And we see it happening right now. And eventually, every bully has its day. Every dog has its day. Every bully meets its match. Every bully meets its match. They labeled Colin Kaepernick, yeah. And they weaponize peaceful protesters. And that's the scary part, is that you're living in a time when everyone doesn't have First Amendment rights. Only certain groups. It's always been that way. That's the thing that I want you guys to take a strange level of comfort in, is that it's always been this way. The things that we are seeing happening now, they're shocking because for the past like 30 to 40 years, it's never been so like in your face, right? The government has always been able to mask it under something else so that it's more palatable. But we're not seeing anything new play out. Again, when we talk about voter suppression, the election of 1789 that resulted in our first president, George Washington, being elected, only 1.3% of the US population actually voted in that election. And that's because only white land-owning men could vote. So when we talk about the beginnings of voter suppression, we don't have to go very far. It started in the inception of this country. So we're not seeing anything new. Unfortunately, we're not seeing anything new happen. We're just seeing a resurgence of what's always been at the like right underneath the surface. But I think what it is that nobody is calling it anything else anymore. They're just calling it what it is. We just don't like y'all. We don't want y'all here. We don't want you to be a part of this process. Like, it's not labeled as poverty. It's not labeled as the war on drugs. It's not labeled as mass incarceration. It's not labeled as the prison industrial system. It's now just, we don't like y'all. We don't like y'all. And that's what is shocking, is that we have to deal with the reality of like, wow, we have done so much and come so far, and people still feel the same way generations later. And that's why I'm convinced like this is something that is taught. I know how I felt back in November. It's a complete shock because, again, the very first election I was legally able to participate in was um, President Obama's his first run for president, when he initially got in the White House. And I remember the feeling of like, it felt like an out of body experience the night of the election when we found out that he had won, and what it meant for our community. And so I lived all of my college experience into motherhood, right? That's my mid 20s under Obama. I never ever dreamed that we would be where we are now after seeing that and seeing like how far we had come, right? So it's to see everything played out the way that it did in this election was a really like somber, like pull back into the reality. Like, yeah, you've been living life real good to the point where you got spoiled. You got spoiled. And the thing about it is like we saw all the signs there, because even to watch what ended up happening with Representative Al Green, where he was escorted out of the joint address a few weeks ago, that started when Obama was president. They openly heckled him when he was president. And it started from there, and then it continued on through Biden's administration. In fact, his last joint address, like Marjorie Taylor Greene came with a Make America Great Again hat on and heckled him his entire speech. And no one said anything. And I just remember thinking like how disgustingly low we had come politically, that you can disagree with the president, right? And then openly like insult them and be disrespectful to them just because you don't like them, right? That's crazy. um, and so I just feel like we got very spoiled, and we got a little too like comfortable in the idea that maybe finally we were reaching a level of acceptance within society. And now we've just been pulled back into this very stark reality that no, no, we're not as far as we thought that we were. And now we have to have the wherewithal of our ancestors. I know we like to say, like, we not our ancestors. We not going to let them sick dogs on us or whatever. And that might be true. We might throw hands in a way that they didn't back then. But we are also not our ancestors in the fact that we don't fight like them. We don't have the wherewithal like how they had. They may not have been throwing hands, but the fact that they let their bodies be on the line like that to have dogs sicked on them and water hoses and all of that, like, are we willing to fight with the gumption that they fought to get all that it is that they got? Are we willing to fight for rights that we might not see in our generation? Our children might reap the benefits of what we fight for now. Our grandchildren, we might not see it happen in our lifetimes, but is it still worth it enough to us to fight for it? Even if that's the case, are we willing to fight for a world that we might not be alive to see? If that means that our kids and our grandkids and their children will be able to see it. That's the type of wherewithal that our ancestors have. And those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves at this junction of the road. Because if we're not, we should probably stop complaining. That's the reality. And with that, I yield my time, y'all. It is 9:59. And well, it's 10 o'clock now. So our live office hours are officially over. Again, y'all, we are coming down to the wire of race and rights. After this week, we have 1 week left of class. That is crazy that we've been together for almost 8 weeks. I've been thoroughly enjoying it. So tomorrow, we are going to be talking about affirmative action, DEI, and what all of that means and where all of it came from, and also how we're seeing it being rolled away and what we need to be doing and discussing and thinking about now. And then later on in this week, we are going to talk about the very pivotal role that Black women have played in the fight for civil liberties and civil rights, and how their work has helped to shape the Constitution of the United States as well. And then next week, we are going to close things out. So for all of y'all that have been sticking with me, thank you so much for engaging in the content. Again, I cannot express to y'all how much I appreciate each and every single one of you that watches the videos, engages, comes on these lives every single week, comments. Like, I really, really appreciate you guys. If you guys get a follow from that fake page as well, please report them and block them. Please, 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 please. It is not me. Hopefully by next week, that page will be gone because they have about 1,700 followers at this point. I'm not happy about it. But anyways, so I will see you guys tomorrow. And I hope you guys continue to enjoy the material. And I'm hoping to see some really good discussion under tomorrow's video as well. So make sure you join me here or over on YouTube at Black and Briefed. It'll be posted before 6 p.m. tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I will see you guys in the comments. Thank you guys again for joining. All right, guys. Thank you guys again. And I will see you guys next week.